everyone. Welcome to Tuesday evening, last Tuesday of the month. I'm Tania Farran, excited to be here tonight to talk to you about parenting in the trenches, along with my co-host and partner over here, Dr. Qureshi. So, Dr. Qureshi, give yourself an introduction.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. And as you're pointing that way, I'm actually this way. At least on my screen, okay? Not yours. But I'm like on this way. So yes, Dr. Tania, I got it right. I'm Dr. Qureshi, coming live from Towson, Maryland, here at Umit Center for Healing Relationships. And I'm so excited to be here. And, time is passing by so quickly. We are on our third Parenting in the Trenches episode. I can't believe March is almost over and we're going into the fourth month. So time passes by really, really quickly. And, before we get into our topic for tonight, I just want to wish everybody a happy Ramadan. We are in the last 10 days of Ramadan. So a lot is going on right now, a lot of blessings, a lot of prayers. I, again, am fasting. So you are going to see me munch on a few things like I did 2 weeks ago. So part of me during that brief 2 to 3 minutes. But yeah, happy Ramadan to everybody. And let's get this party started. Parenting in the trenches. What are we talking about today? We have an amazing topic.
Well, we also want to make sure everyone understands that this is part one of finding our parenting village. So we're excited to bring this topic with you. We've got some questions for you to answer with us. So, please jump in, join in, and answer some of these questions. But we're talking about finding our parenting village and how important that is. Dr. Qureshi is a relational trauma expert. I have been in education for probably 30 years now, as a principal and an educator. And so, finding that parenting village really is really important as a part of your parenting journey. And so we felt like this topic was going to be really important. And as we started talking about it, we planned it months ago. And then we always come back the night before and kind of fine tune what we want. And then we were like, this has so much information to give to parents that we felt like we really needed to make this 2 nights. So we'll be coming back and talking about this also in April at the end of the month. But we thought this was important to go through right now. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think all the topics that we talk about are so significant and they are so meaty. Mm-hmm. Like there's so much to unpack. There's so many headings and subheadings. Like we can take any of those topics that we've discussed so far and do an entire series on those, right? Absolutely. Yet I think the goal of this series was really to disseminate some of the general information about parenting, the challenges around it, the celebrations around it, the evolution of it, right? The diversity around parenting, right? We just wanted to get the word out there that, hey, these are the things that are coming up in the world right now. As I'm doing the clinical work, you're doing more of the educational work, but there's so much overlap in how we integrate and bring systems together, which is why I think our collaboration is so valuable. And because we have experts on both ends of the spectrums, like things that are very important in a child's development, but also an individual's development, right? Yes. There is the relational component, and then there is the academic component, which is very tied into our career, which is tied into our self-esteem, how we see ourselves in the world. So again, this is just part one of part 2, but this topic in itself could be part 10 along with many others. So with that, let's get started.
Let's do it.
So one of the first things that I think we always want to do is we want to pick your brain, right? We want to see what you're thinking for those people that are attending live with us. We love hearing your experiences, your thoughts. So we found a few really, really good questions that I thought we could propose and maybe get some interaction going. Obviously, we're not going to be able to go through all of these questions, but I am hoping that we can give you access to this presentation and you're able to kind of do some reflections and have these as a guide as you're working on developing your own, creating your own village. So Dr. T, you want to start with the first one?
I do. So those of you that are watching in the audience, or if you're watching on replay, feel free to answer and comment. We'll come back to those. We get notifications when you do that, and we can chime in on your answer if you are watching it on replay. So the first thing that we think is really important, that I think is important, is what does the concept of finding your village mean when it comes to parenting, and why is it so important? And so I was telling Dr. Qureshi this yesterday. About 4 months ago, I was on a newscast, and the news anchor had moved to St. Louis from out of town. And she kind of caught me off guard. Even though I knew the answer to this, she caught me off the guard because she said, I'm from out of town. I work all day. How do I find people to help me? I don't really go to church. So I haven't found a church here. It's not like I can go and join a mom's group there. Where do I find people for my village? And I was kind of taken aback from that. We really wasn't really like on our plan that we were going to talk about on this newscast. And then when I left it, I thought, gosh darn it, I wish I would have said da, 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 da. But there's so many pieces about what does it look like for finding your village. So if you're in there watching and you want to type in there, what does it mean when it comes to parenting, finding your village, and why is that important for you? And while you're thinking about that, I have my book here, Raising the Well-Adjusted Child, a Parent's Manual. The second chapter is really about finding your parenting village. And I call it your united front and assembling your parenting team. But so many people have always called it finding your village. So what comes to mind with you, Dr. Qureshi, when you're thinking about finding that parenting village for parents, or when you're advising parents?
Well, I mean, I think the first thing that comes to my mind is the phrase, it takes a village to raise a child, right? So the concept of finding your village is where we got that from, right? And what that means is, and I think this is consistent with generation. It does not matter which generation you're in or even future generations. It does take a village to raise a child because there's so many moving parts to an individual that parents themselves cannot do it alone, right? And they actually should not, because when you look at children and their developmental stages, they need different relationships. They create different relationships, right? So, in infancy, there's a lot of work around attachment, right? Like, and the caregiver and the nurturing ways that the mom and dad need to show up, or the two parents, right? Like, there's a lot of time spent with those primary caregivers. But once a child hits the next level of developmental stage, right, they need to start socializing with kids their age groups, right? And as we move on through the presentation, you'll see that, at least in the 1970s, there were play dates, which kind of still exist, but they've moved to more play dates are more on video games and virtually, right? So we're going to unpack all of that. But like, as an individual, as a child gets older and older, their needs and their world becomes bigger. And when your world becomes bigger, you have a village, right?
Right.
So the first thing that comes to my mind is the more the merrier. The more positive people, the more helping hands you have, the more successful you're going to be in your parenting. And I think those are also the things that can be barriers as well, because, let's say you have, and again, I'm going to talk in clinical perspectives. Let's say you have a mother who's suffering from postpartum depression. She's not able to show up
right
the way that she needs to. She can't, because that is real. So where's the village then? Like, what do you do? And, we can go down again a full line of things we can talk about, how other countries in the world, how much maternity leave and paternity leave people have, and access to resources that we don't necessarily have in the United States of America, but they recognize the need for that.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's so true. And, I was just kind of reflecting back in my book. The first question that I put is who's on your parenting team and how did you select them? And we don't always think about that before we're having a child. And everybody's life is different. And, exactly what you were saying, in any culture, every race, every situation, every pregnancy situation, every coupling situation, you need to have support and a village. And, you think about that, some people, right, have this beautiful planned out life and they say, I'm going to be able to be married and I'll be able to stay home and I'll be able to have a baby and I won't have to work. And then I'll find this nice little niche of moms and we'll raise these babies together. But that's not the case for every person. It wasn't the case for me. I had to work. We're dual family income. I mean, I didn't have a choice to work. I had to work. My husband had to work. That was different. There are people who are, in having children that don't have a supportive system. Maybe their mate or their partner left, or they are not alive, or whatever the case may be. And now what happens to them? And so finding that village and really looking for that. And one of the things I write in here is ask for help. Find out who can be a part of your parenting village, because it's okay to ask for help. I think a lot of times we think we don't have to ask for help. We should be super mom. We should do it all. But we've got to find our village, and what does it mean to you and why is it important to you? Like, what parts of that support do you need? Because the support that I need is different than the support of my neighbor, etc. I'm going to tell you what's really funny for me personally. I was the worst. My kids still make fun of this. I was the worst mom to wake up in the middle of the night. I could never do it. I couldn't do it. I'd always have to wake my husband up. I'm like, you have to get up. I can't. And how I can only imagine if I was alone, to have to do that. But we rely on each other so much sometimes.
Yeah, and as you're sharing, I'm thinking, man, you're like the luckier ones that your husband
100%.
actually got up, because there are many cultures, unfortunately, even now, where the roles are very child caring roles are primarily the mother's roles, and dads still aren't open to changing diapers, unfortunately. And again, I'm talking abroad. I'm not necessarily talking in America, but even here, right, there are traditional
Sure.
roles around parenting too.
Absolutely, there
Right.
are.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. And
So,
so these questions are great. If you don't even have children yet and you're contemplating children, either get my book, start answering these questions, but start asking yourself these questions. Be prepared for this. This is a big deal to be a parent. It's a big deal. This is a whole human life that we're taking care of. And so we're here our purpose is to be here to help you with this journey that you're on.
the roller
Absolutely.
coaster that you can't come off of.
Yes. Yes.
Right.
I know we could talk about finding your village for hours,
Yeah.
and scenarios of finding your village, but do you want to talk about question number 2?
Yeah, we can talk about question number 2. I was also thinking about number 5, um, dropping down to 5, and then we can come back to 2 if you would want to
Sure.
talk about it.
Sure. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
This is
I mean,
actually the perfect question because this is the one that the news anchor had asked me. She's moved from Illinois. She's in Missouri. She's
yeah.
doesn't have family nearby. Family's 2.5 hours away. How does she build this support network from scratch? And I had given some examples of, talking to people at your church and this and that. And she's like, we don't really have a church. We don't really go to church. What do I do from there? And I was kind of dumbfounded, to be honest. I was like, it was taken aback. And I thought, I don't really have a solid answer right now. And then I thought about it as soon as I walked out of there and I thought, she's working with a bunch of women. I had given all of these women my book. They're already one village. They're already starting as one, right? So if we
Yeah.
start talking to the people that we work with, I mean, I can tell you in education myself, I worked in a building full of women. I learned so much from these ladies and men that were there being parents with their parenting examples. and just watching them and talking to them and then getting resources of babysitters or events or how to sign my kids up for T-ball or whatever I needed. I started that at work with that
Yeah.
parenting village with the ladies that I worked with, that I
Yeah.
was near. And so that would be a good place to start. You know, a lot of times your HR department may have some resources for you as well. They may have outreach community partnerships that are coming in, things like that. If you have a large company that you're working for, obviously, I've said the church several times. There's lots of mom organizations that you can start doing. Talk to your neighbors. You
Yeah.
know, get to know your neighbors, ask them. Usually they have somebody who has a child or someone that can, help out. If you're, that might say, oh, so and so is wanting to babysit. They're looking for extra money this summer. They may be able to help you with that. Even,
Mhm.
when I was a young child, I even babysat for this man who had to work during the day. And I would just watch his kids at the house, kind of like a nanny in the summer,
Okay.
so you can even get support when you're at home.
Hmm.
And then, we have kids who have special needs, and those parents definitely need help and support. And so tapping into the community resources where they may have different types of programs, day programs where you can take your kids where they can be supervised,
Yeah.
with people who are trained to help support your kiddos. What do you think? What are some ways or advice that you give to parents when they come to you, they're new and they're looking for support for a network?
Yeah, so I think everything that you named is great. And it also makes me think about specifically for families who migrate here from a different country, right? So
Yeah,
we're talking about relocation in a lot of different ways, right? So you can obviously relocate domestically from one state to another, right? Or, you move and you're not close to family members. I
mhm,
think what's important to highlight also is that there is in creating a parenting community or just creating a community, it is difficult, especially when you come from another country and you have to assimilate and you have to, learn the culture, and there's cultural barriers, language barriers. So the things that Dr. Tanya mentioned, those are amazing resources. Yet, depending on the family or individual, they may not have the resources or the skills to be able to access them because it requires a certain level of moving, right? And
mhm,
networking. So in those situations, what I have seen to be very, very helpful, first and foremost, is people usually connect with people from their own background. They start finding a community that is culturally inclusive, right? So I know for me as a Pakistani American, growing up, my parents were surrounded by Pakistani families, and
sure.
my parents didn't necessarily have to learn English right away. My parents found people. We found a mosque where we would go for Quran classes, etc. So the first thing I would say is find a community that you can connect with culturally, right? Because you have to feel comfortable. And in that, you start networking and, having conversations with people who have children. And that will open up a network of you knowing what's out there, right? But also, if there isn't something, create something, right? So there's a
Mhm,
lot of different ways to go about doing that. And I also think for me as a clinical professional, we have this parenting in the trenches workshop, right? I do a lot of co-parenting sessions. I think one of the things that is on the list is when you're thinking about your parenting village, your mental health professionals are a part of your parenting village now, right?
mhm.
Like you need someone from the outside to be able to help you in this parenting journey. Um,
Absolutely.
so I think there's a lot of different ways to go about seeking the support. You really have to identify where you are and what your needs are and
Mhm.
use your resources. They say word of mouth is the most powerful resource, right? So ask around, get a little uncomfortable, make some new friends, go talk to somebody that you saw at the mosque, or even going to the park. When you go to the park, especially during the weather, when the weather is nice, you'll see kids playing. And if you see your kid gravitating to another kid that you're getting along with, find out who their parent is,
Yes.
right?
It
So
really is true, right? You kind of have to put yourself out there. And one of the things that I was thinking about going up to question 2 in today's fast paced, what challenges do parents face in building a supportive community around their family? They may not be able to be at all those places interacting, right? They might go to drop their kids off at a childcare. They may go to work. They may get home late, pick their kids up. They don't have that. But, really, there are lots of, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, like what we're providing for families to do by watching this. There's other supportive groups, but also watch the news. They're always talking about community events, and so like Dr. Qureshi was saying, if you're finding, your culture is connecting, having a festival, having a meeting, having the place where they worship, they go to, a lot of times those things are highlighted in the news, and so pay attention to that, pull up the local paper on the internet. I know no one gets newspapers anymore, but pull it up, look for community events in your area, to be able to bring your kids to. Check out, those other local programs, the YMCAs, those things like that, where you can engross your kids to it, ask at their daycare, ask at, their schools where they
yeah.
are.
Well, schools definitely have resources, and there's a lot of community centers or even agencies that do like Family Fun Day too.
Yes.
I know I'm gonna do one this year in the summer, kind of like back to school. So I think it's a way to get out there and really meet other people who are on this roller coaster with you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because there's nothing worse. And I wish I should have, next time I'm going to remember to put this slide up of my mom and her friends. We used to live in San Diego when I was a kid. And we lived with 3 families. We didn't live with them, but they lived in our neighborhood. And the 3 moms had their coffee time together. That was their parenting village. They would send us off to school. They would bring their tea. They would come to one person's house and hang out together and visit. And they're still friends 50 years later.
Wow.
And they're still drinking tea together and hanging out. And you can really build some really incredible relationships with people. And having someone be part of your village, doesn't mean that you do every single thing that they want or they do every single thing that you like or want, but it's feeling out and finding ways that you can help support one another and finding the right way to do that, if that makes sense, So it's not just that you find a group of people, but how do you support them? How do they support you? Where's that balance? And there's certain things, like I would say for certain tasks, my own personal parenting village was my mom, my in-laws, my brother, obviously my husband. I'm extremely fortunate. My husband participated 100% in being a parent, still does. But like my in-laws had their role. They would get our kids on and off the bus. Like that was a huge, huge help for us. Like huge. We didn't have to pay for before or after care. Our kids were at their house maybe 20, 30 minutes. Sometimes none, if my husband was home, but it was lovely. My mother had a different role. She kind of did those things for me that I couldn't do, like run and get the white choir shirt that they needed, go and pick this up, take them to this event. She kind of had that running around. And my brother filled in when those extra gaps, he didn't have any children. And so he would go and take my kids, pick them up from softball, pick them up from gymnastics on occasion. And then he'd spoil them, he'd love that, and so when you build your village, you're giving people different roles that they're going to be able to play within that village.
As I'm listening to you, Dr. T, I have to share my story, and
I'd love to hear
it. And it brings me to the concept or the point that
I lost you.
Okay. It brings me to the point that I'm making is that your parenting village will also change over time, right? Because I mean, even if you just think about relocation earlier when we talked about, right? Like you may have had a parenting village that you left behind or, and you're moving somewhere else and you may still have access, you may not. So like, it's part of a transition. It's part of life in itself, right? As we move about. And as I think about my own parenting village, right, up into the age of 7 is when I moved here with my parents to the United States. So my parenting village went from literally an entire village to just 6 of us.
Yeah.
So, and when I say a village, and I literally mean a village, so my parents, my dad's side of the family lived in a village before we moved into the city in Pakistan. And supposedly my grandfather was a big deal. Like we had like the biggest house in the village. He was a scholar. He was teaching Quran, and like he had a very big role in the village that we lived in. Obviously, class-wise, obviously we did well too, right? But I remember I used to actually, I was raised by one of my aunts, my dad's sister, who is no longer with us. She passed away years ago. But I remember bits and pieces of my childhood. Like I lived with her. She was my primary caretaker, especially after my brother was born. And she was a teacher in the village.
Oh my gosh.
So I was always with her. I was her like teacher's assistant. Like I would literally be in the classroom and the kids in the village would listen to what I would tell them to do because I was the niece of their teacher.
Yeah.
So I was surrounded with beautiful people. And then, you know, even the Pakistani culture, right? We're very family oriented. So we lived in an extended family system where there were like 3 different families living in 3 rows of houses. So we had a big village.
Yeah. That
And
is really cool.
And when we moved to the US, man, was that a shift. I remember the first few years, I wanted to run back home. I was like, I want to live here. There's nobody here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
It is. It's very different. And I've learned so much. I've loved that. Oh my gosh. I was talking to my mom today and I was like, I have just loved this journey I've been on these last 5 years, and to be able to meet you and to meet so many other people. A good friend of mine, Noah, when we started talking about parenting, she shared that when she was raised in Israel, she lived in I'm going to say it hopefully correct, kibbutz, where the children live in one home, you know, and the adults live in their spaces, and the parents all take turns raising all of the kids, like literally in a village, right? And that's how she was raised. And I just thought that was just very cool to share. But there are so many models, right, of being raised, so many village options for us to be able to, you know, to share out. With that being said, we'll go into more questions and more discussion about building a village, but we thought it'd be really fun tonight to talk about, you know, a comparative analysis of 1970 to present day, right? We talked about in our last session together about how we've learned how to parent from our past. We've learned how to parent from how we were raised, what we did. You know, Dr. Qureshi, she doesn't have a person here now to raise and be the teacher and all of that in her, you know, she has children. So she's going to have a different model of what her family would look like. But when we look about that, we talk about, you know, the transition from 1970s to present day, and how parenting has changed in that amount of time. I was raised in the 70s. The parenting style was very different. In my opinion, it was very laid back, very nonchalant, very relaxed. You know, there was, you know, kids were playing in the streets. They were running in groups together. Parents were hanging out together. And there were just some really amazing relationships that were formed, I think, for a lot of people in the 70s when they were doing that, and probably into the 80s and 90s. And now here we are 50 some years later, and we're looking at how do we raise our kids now? We can't raise them with the same model of 1970. The world is not the same. It's different. And we may love that model. We may think that's beautiful and wonderful, but we're going to do something a little different. We need to do something different.
Yeah.
You want to say anything before I go to the next slide?
Well, I was thinking, I wanted to ask if people thought, first of all, who watched the 70s show, first and foremost, right?
I did watch it, but now as it was syndicated, you know, I like watched it probably on Netflix or something.
Yeah, I probably caught on to it later on.
Probably because my kids watched it. My kids were probably really little when it was on, so I didn't watch it till later.
Okay, so with what you have watched, do you think it did good, like it was a good
Oh,
representation of the 70s?
absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. I do think it was. Yes.
Okay.
100%. Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, so I think with 1970s, I wasn't here. Obviously, I actually wasn't even born. And let
Rub
alone
it
on the
in.
other part of the world, right?
That's okay. It's all
So
right.
I can only speak to it from, the things that I've learned and, the people that I have encountered that were raised in the 1970s. It sounds like it was a turning point in parenting as well, right? Like a lot of things started to shift, a lot of things started to change. And I think if you move on to the next slide, um, we can talk a little bit about, some of those changes and how parenting was happening in the 1970s.
Right. And it does start to change and evolve during this time for sure. We did have play dates with our kids, with other kids in the neighborhood. You'll probably heard some things like we didn't have to come in till the street lights came on, right? Or our
Mhm.
parents flashed the front porch light, then we were expected to come in. And so, those things were definitely true to life. They really happened. The PTA, it was a big deal to be a member of the PTA, to volunteer up at your kid's school was
Mhm.
very big. There was a lot of engagement in the schools from parents.
Mhm.
The school was the social hub for kids and for parents, would come together for that. There was you know, some support groups. I wouldn't say a ton. I think support groups began evolving. Community centers have began evolving in the
Mhm.
70s. Television and media, let me tell you, you guys will, once I say this, it'll be on all of your phones and everything, but there was the TV shows would put out at about 9:30 or 10 o'clock at night. It's 10 o'clock. Do you know where your kids are? Meaning get them in from outside and put them to bed. Like it just kind of reminded people, check on your kids. Do you know where they are? Those messages aren't going out right now. Those
Mhm.
messages could go out. I think that's a good thing to go out. Thank you, Mohammed. Village life is beautiful. And I think that, there was a lot of shared time together with kids and, families and, neighborhood gatherings. All of that happened in the 70s.
Mhm.
So that was already kind of a little village. So the people on your street helped watch your kids.
Yeah.
Like I said, we had these three moms who were home most of the time where they volunteered at our schools. And that's how life went.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it was really a
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah. And as I look back, like even in my own upbringings, right, which I think I'm a 1984 baby, so we came here in 1990, right?
Yeah.
So in the 1990s. And
Yeah.
and I remember, and again, I don't think this is specific just to the Pakistani community. I think it's you can extend it out to other communities too. But I remember there was, like, at that time, at least for my family, there was no concept of paying for a babysitter. I mean, and I
Right.
don't know whether we could afford it at that time or not, and maybe that was the reason. But in the 90s, when I was young, 7, 8 years old, when I moved here, my mom's friends who had other children, they all would take turns
Yes.
looking after the kids.
Yes.
Like, hey, Tazim, okay, I'm gonna drop the kids off. Can you take them to the Quran class? I gotta go run here. Hey, can you pick them up? You gotta go to
Yes.
their house because we gotta go here. Right? Like we didn't have babysitters. We had aunties who were my mom's friends whose house we went to, or their children came to our house. I mean, I don't know, Dr. T, like, was that also happening
100%.
in American households?
Yes, absolutely. That did happen in American households, 100%. So I was living in San Diego at the time, and we all would go to swimming lessons together. Our moms would sign us all up, and then they would take turns who was dropping off, who was picking up, which gave the other one the opportunity to have the time alone and to
Mhm.
have the time to clean their house or go to the grocery store or get dinner ready or whatever they needed to do. And they would do that. And I remember in the summer, we literally were outside all of the time, and you'd go out you would hang at someone's house outside, and then you would come in, have lunch, go back out, come in for dinner, go back out until the lights went off. And then you came in and took your bath and went to bed. But for the most part, we did. I mean, we would put on these big shows and events. The boys and the girls would be together. The girls did gymnastics. We would actually put on a show at the end of summer for our parents. And even the teenage older kids, 16, 17, would help us create these skits and all this stuff. I mean, we lived in just a really cool neighborhood, so I'm sure not everyone's life experience was like this, but it was just very cool. And we all took care of each other. And so whoever's yard you were in, that mom was kind of overseeing you, and then you'd work out, do something in the other person's yard. It was really a great time. And we did that. Parents did really collaborate together to make that happen. So when we think about things and we think about fast forward to 2025, I think some of those things still happen. I really do. I mean, I can tell you, my kids are out of high school 10, 12 years now, and I shuttled kids all over the place. I did. I was bringing kids here, there, and everywhere. But there are a lot of pieces, though, that are very different than what they were. And I'm sure you see a lot of scenarios from families who are probably having a harder time managing life than they did probably in the 70s. I'm not saying that the 70s were perfect, or the 80s or the 90s, but as we started getting into more of a digital age, we all became more sedentary, needing to leave the house less. But yet our works have increased and our responsibilities seem to have increased because of the demand of on-demand things, including ourselves at work and things like that. And so and kids' involvement has increased. Parents are having a hard time managing parenting and being able to manage their kids. What are some things that you're hearing about, or you've been working with families with this?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest things would be the number two that is highlighted here is digital integration, right? And how that is showing up. Again, I think that we have evolved a lot as a society in so many ways, and social media and technology are remarkable, and they're a form of asset, right? Like the access that we have to things now through digital media, right? Social media, internet is, I mean, you name it, we can do it. Yet at the same time, it has also brought some barriers around the human to human connection, which is very important for us as human beings. So the things that I commonly see, obviously, are the things that operate on a daily basis when I'm working with families. It's, okay, well, the phone isn't allowed on the dinner table, but my kids keep bringing it. Or they're on their video games all the time, and I'm telling them it's dinner time, it's dinner time, it's dinner time. And then I got to go in there and scream at them. And then they have a little meltdown just because they're so zoomed in on their games, right? So their video games. So I think that connection is really, really important. I think we have to really think about the value of our relationships and how we want to move forward, and how we can set some boundaries around like integration of social media, IT, technology, and all that good stuff,
right?
Because we have to mention COVID, right? We have to talk about COVID. In the past few years, COVID increased isolation, it increased depression, it increased anxiety, right? Which in turn forced people to stay to themselves. And now we're kind of moving past that and like getting back to the new normal, but the new normal isn't going to be the past normal, it's going to be a new normal, right? Yet at the same time, I don't think we'll have access to all this information that was happening in the world if it wasn't for social media.
Exactly. It is kind of a catch-22, isn't it? Like, we'll never go back to the way things were before. Some things are a lot better, for example, I am a virtual middle school principal. My kids school from home, and I think that's really good for a lot of the kids that we serve. It's really helping them become more successful. It's not for everyone, which is a
Mhm.
nice thing to bring back. But then with that being said, we're having a harder time getting kids to get out and socialize, and for parents to be able to disconnect and get out and socialize. So think about that, right? You watch a group of parents who have gone to soccer practice. They're sitting there at soccer practice. Most of the time, back in the old days, parents would probably hang around together and stand around and talk. But now everyone's on their own personal device. They're taking a meeting. They've got their earbuds in. They're listening to a podcast. We have kind of disattached to engaging with other also parents. And so the nice thing is there are some parenting apps, or I say parenting apps, but there's parenting groups like on Facebook, things
Mhm.
like that. And you can connect with parents with that. But I encourage you to not only connect with parents in that realm, but to also go and connect with parents in person. Find ways that you can meet in person with people. And other organizations. And I was just telling Dr. Qureshi, I do have, like, do you mind if I share my event
Oh, no,
that I have coming
absolutely.
up?
Go ahead.
Okay. So I want to go ahead and this is going to cover our faces, but because for lack of a better way to show it, but I do have a book study on my book coming up, which I do this about 4 times a year. There's 4, it says in-person meeting dates, but there are 4 meeting dates virtually, unless you're in my town, that we would meet for 2 hours. And, we go over the sections of the book and talk about it and break it down together, which is really awesome. So just send me an email. You can, drop it in, or you can send me a message on LinkedIn or Facebook or wherever you're watching this, and we can get together. I can get you on the next round of Parent to Parent. And it's a really fun group that we get together, and, we just kind of talk about the book and do a little book study and talk as parents and get to know other parents and get ideas from other people and learn more outside of our circle. So that's one of the things that I think is really important for us to do in 2025 with our parents. And I think parents are more open to it than they were a long time ago too, to learning more.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that the other piece is, at least in 2025, when it comes to parenting, this may be on the next slide. I don't know if we want to move on to the next
Sure.
slide. Um, Maybe not necessarily written in this way, but it's in there somewhere. Okay, so
You
one
saw
of
it
the other
somewhere, huh?
things, it's in there. It's all relative. Okay, so so I think what else we're seeing in 2025 is the need to take care of your mental health, right? So parents are recognizing that of course, parenting is hard, and we're starting to identify intergenerational parenting traumas, right? People, adult clients are coming in talking about their parenting, their experiences with parenting as the child, and how certain traumas happen and how that is impacting how they may be showing up. So i
Sure.
don't i don't believe that was happening before, obviously, right? I think in the
Yeah,
1970s
I don't think
families
so.
started branching out to create communities that were different than their family of origin,
Yes.
right? They started opening the door for community centers, support groups, like looking outside of the box, right? Because we tend to stay close net, right? And,
Yeah.
I think during our first session, we talked about the difference between being a biological mother and father and being a parent. Parent can be anybody, right?
Mhm.
Um,
Yes.
However, your biological mother and your father are usually your parents, right? But that doesn't mean they're actually parenting effectively either,
Mhm.
right? So there are many parents that we come across in our journey of life. And I think the 1970s started seeing that and started branching out like, hey, we're not just going to hang around cousins, we're going to have play dates with other people, which in
Yes.
turn obviously changed a lot of things. Let's not forget about the feminist movement, right? Like before, our moms were at home, so you could drop the kids off,
Oh my gosh.
right? But now you have working moms. You can't
You
drop
know,
the kids off.
I just want to share this with you. I love my mom dearly. Those of you who've been watched for, you'll know. Those of you that know me know I love her dearly. Best, one of my best friends. She and my husband, they're up there. They're the top two. Okay. But my mom, when my husband and I have always worked really hard on our marriage. And when we would say we were going out of town, just the two of us, and we'd ask someone to watch our kids, my mom always was open to volunteering. But a few times I remember her saying to me, I don't know why you need this break. I never felt like I needed a break being a mom. Being a mom never made me feel like I needed a break from my kids. And I said, okay, well, good for you. I finally said, and I would feel totally fine saying this if she was standing next to me. I finally said, but you know what? That was in 1970. In 1970, you worked 3 hours a day at the school while I was at school. So you had the other 4 hours at home alone. While dad was gone, we were both gone. You visited with your friends every day and had coffee. You hung out, you were able to grocery shop alone. You did all of this stuff alone. I don't have any of that time. I'm out the door at 7:30 in the morning, like most parents, with my kids in tow, are ready and dressed out. My husband's out the door at 6:30 in the morning. He comes home at 4. I don't know what time I'm coming home, depending on what my job was. Was I a teacher or a principal or going to school? I went to school for 12 years to get my doctorate, from master's on, 12 years straight of going to night school every Thursday night. I said, Mom, did you do all of that? I was in dance one night a week when I was a kid. My kids were in dance 4 to 5 nights a week and on Sundays. And the other one played club ball. Mom, I need a break, and so our world in 2025 is different than it was then. And so parents need to find a village to say, I need a break. I need to stop. It's okay. There's a stigma behind saying, I need to take a break. Even my mom, as much as she loves me, she really was questioning, I don't get why you need a break. Like,
Well,
you know,
I have a reason. I have an understanding of why.
I would love to hear it.
And again, if your mom watches this, Mom, I'm sorry if it doesn't align with what I'm thinking, you know. But I think the simplest yet most complex answer to that is that previously people's parents' identities, and our moms specifically, identities revolved around their role as a mother.
100%.
So their
Yes.
entire life was dedicated to being a mother. They
Correct.
got so much, and I'm not saying current moms don't, right? They got so much joy to it. That's all they knew. They didn't know anything else, right? So I'm not surprised that your mom is asking you, oh, why you need to go away? I love it. Because that was her entire identity, right? A mom and a wife, right?
Right.
And again, I love our mothers and grandmothers for being so devotional to their children.
Yes.
Yet I will not just be fulfilled as being a mom. That is just one part of our life. And you had other parts. You had other identities. So yes, you needed a break to pour back in so you can pour back into being a mom.
And I wanted to go have fun with my husband. So those of you
that
that are
too.
out, I wanted to go have fun with my husband without my kids. I wanted to go have fun. It's okay.
Adult
I have
fun
fun with my
you
kids.
have adult fun.
Yes. Like, what's wrong with that? Nothing. Those of you out there listening, there's nothing wrong with that. And so, in fact, I think that's what helped us have such a healthy marriage post children leaving, is that we took time. I mean, oh my gosh. And I'm talking, we might have done it once a year, twice a year, where we'd go away for the weekend. But that self-care piece is huge. And I think it's on our list somewhere down there, Dr. Qureshi, that we're going to talk about self-care for parents. But we really, really, when you're looking at these social media platforms of parents, we're seeing a lot of imagery of perfect parents. We're seeing a lot of things like this that are coming through, which is pressureful for other parents. And gosh, we just got to take care of ourselves. We can't do everything.
It's nearly impossible. And I have a statement that I think is significant to share here, and I'm hopefully people can remember. First of all, there's no such thing as a perfect parent, right?
Right.
And on top of that, I want to add the perfect parent is imperfect
Correct.
because we're always learning and growing.
Always.
We're always being thrown all types of balls, and some of them we cannot catch. We let them hit, and then we get up and we figure it out.
Well, and life happens too. And so it's so important to have a village, whether it's your girlfriends or it's a relative or it's a friend or it's a
Mhm.
neighbor or if it's a leader in church, it's a coach. All of these people are here to help support you, in your journey. I mean, my husband, the first time that he coached, he couldn't believe the parenting role that it took. He didn't realize that he just wanted to go coach, but there's a lot of responsibility in helping raise all of the kids. And I do feel as adults, it is our responsibility to do that, to help
Yeah.
all of our kids that we're involved with.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
so
I mean,
important.
kids, we as humans, we need coaches, we need parents, we need a village. I mean, there's so much learning and growth that happens with human to human connection, so much collaboration, so much like learning, right?
Hmm.
Think about like the kids that, your first day of school, right? Like what that is, even though you don't want to leave, you're like crying and you don't want to go into the classroom. Once you get in there, beautiful things happen, right?
Right.
So even with parenting or creating your parenting village, especially if you have to start over again for one reason or another, it is a time where you are going to feel nervous and anxious and have some fears. Yet putting yourself out there, networking, collaborating, attending events, talking to people will ultimately help you create your village and get you the support that you need, because you're not on this journey alone
No.
at all. There's
And
many,
no,
many, many of us going through it.
right. We do, their parents do feel like because they're the parent, they should know how to do it all, but we don't. We just don't know how to do it all. And so pick up your resources, get my book, get other books, join
Mhm.
events, follow us. I've got a YouTube channel to check out creative living ideas. We're working on another book will come one time soon from these events, but just get out there and start looking for some resources. And again, just because the resource is there doesn't mean you have to take it. Just find out about it. Think about it.
Mhm.
See, does this fit in my life? My model of a parent doesn't fit in everyone's life. Not everyone has the support that I have. And
Yeah.
I'm aware of that. And so helping to find other people that support is important to do. So
Yeah.
rely on that collaboration, that technology, the community,
Mhm.
um, and learn from each other, learn from other parents. I still learn from other parents
Yeah.
all the time. When I talk to people, I learn. And a lot of times the things that you can learn also spill into other relationships that you have.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they say it's a circle of life, right? The Lion King, circle of life,
Yeah.
circle
Yeah.
of life.
And then
So we,
seek mental health. You should speak on that. When should a parent all of a sudden say, I should probably go talk to a therapist?
a parent.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. Well, I think everybody's journey with mental health is different. Everybody's needs are different, right? But I believe that even the most healthiest people, right, healthiest quote unquote, whatever that means for whatever
Right.
cultural background, right?
Right.
I think we should all be in therapy. We should be doing some reflective work, right? We should understand who we are, where we come from, what our identities are, and how we're showing up in this world, right? So there's always growth. There's always growth. I mean, life comes with challenges. There's not one single person that can't say I haven't experienced anything. So, and therapy is about is it isn't just about having that nervous breakdown or being depressed or being anxious
Right.
all the time or experiencing trauma. People are seeking therapy for life transitions. People are seeking therapy for clarity. Like, I don't know what to do, right? People are seeking therapy to enhance relationships, right? Continue to build on intimacy, continue to
Yes.
build on support. People are seeking therapy for co-parenting, right? And they could be doing a semi good job, right? So I always say the answer to that question is when, like yesterday.
Yes.
Right? Yet, I also understand that there is a huge mental health stigma around seeking services too. And for certain cultures, it's even worse, right?
Sure.
Um, so with that, as I look at it in the context of this parenting village and our parenting in the trenches, I will safely say that if you are planning on having children, right, therapy should be part of your goal, period.
Love that.
Right? The
I
same way there's
love
premarital
that.
counseling, there is pre-parenting counseling. Okay, go in there, talk about it with your co-partner, whoever the co-parent is going to be. Obviously you want to be prepared, and you can never be prepared for these things. Yet I think having some skills and having some resources already, like having your book already and reading through it,
Mhm.
it's going to be helpful.
Yes,
So
I
um,
agree.
that's where I'm at with that. And of course, all pregnancies aren't planned, right? So when you find out
Right.
you are pregnant, then go ahead, sign up then.
I agree. I mean, right. I agree with you. I feel like even if you feel like you don't need a therapist, you should have one in your pocket. You just never, meet a few, find the one that you vibe with, that you're, feeling good with, that you can connect with. Because I think that relationship is important when you're doing that. But I also think that it's a great person to bounce ideas off of, to talk through things, to get an outside perspective. And if your culture doesn't believe in it, go anyway. Tell everybody you were at pickleball. It doesn't matter. Get dressed in your pickleball outfit and your paddle, and then go run around the neighborhood and get sweaty when you come back home, pick up your kids from the babysitter. Nobody needs to know then, but go for you. Go for you. And my kids and I, we've always been very open about a therapist, and we've all seen them, but it's so enlightening and so refreshing and so inspiring to go and have these conversations. That's my perception of it, to be able to do that. And then you start getting some tools, you start regaining some power, back to yourself, instead of feeling like things are out of control. And as Dr. Qureshi said at the very beginning, every time your kids grow or change, your parenting styles are going to have to adapt and change and move a little bit to something else. So it's really important that you're paying attention, you're getting the books, you're joining our events, you're joining me for Parent to Parent. Let's start talking about these things and helping each other out, raise our kids. Let's raise our kids really well together and have fun doing it.
Yeah.
That's
And
one thing.
there's a lot of fun in it, a lot of joy, That's why
Yeah,
humans, we keep procreating because there's
right.
joy. If there wasn't, listen, society would not be evolving, our population would not be off the rockers, right? So
Exactly.
there's a lot of joy in it. And I think joy comes from doing the work that you need to do to be better, right? And even with parenting, I think one of the other things, and we're right on time
Yeah,
and ending, the point that I want to make is like, it's a skill that you need to learn, right? It's like learning how to walk, learning how to talk, right? Just because you get pregnant all of a sudden does not mean you have the skills to be a parent, to be a mother or a father. Like, it literally is a skill that you have to learn as time goes on, but it changes you in so many different ways, right?
right.
So why wouldn't you have support? You didn't learn how to read by yourself.
I was just going to say, I couldn't just come sit in your chair and do your job,
Right. Right.
because just by sitting in your chair saying I'm a therapist doesn't mean that I'm going to be able to do your job, or
Yeah.
go sit at the firehouse and be able to know because I said I'm a firefighter, or I've been raised
Yeah.
by firefighters. So I should know how to do everything. You're not going to. So, this is a new part of your life, a new stage of your life, or an old stage. And even grandparents, this is a great book for grandparents. It gets them thinking. It helps them along with their children that they're helping to raise. So, oh my gosh, we could talk on and on. But next month, we're at an hour already. Next month, we're coming back to this, building your parenting, finding your village, talking about that. So if you watch this on replay, catch us on the last Tuesday of the month. I'll have that event out probably through the weekend. Have that set out there so that we can be ready. Sign up to join that one. And yeah, thanks for bringing us along your parenting journey.
Thank you guys. And again, we'll see you guys next month. And maybe Dr. Tania, you and I can talk about, maybe we can bring some diverse parents.
That would be fun.
Well, if there's anybody in the audience that wants to come and talk to us about their parenting village, so next we're going to be focusing more on cultural diversity in parenting, part 2. We would love to have some guest speakers.
Absolutely. Sounds
So
good.
hit us up, guys. And you can find me at Umeed Center here in Tamonia, Maryland. And happy Ramadan and happy Eid for all of those Muslim brothers and sisters.
Yes, absolutely. All right,
Take
everyone.
care.
Have a good Tuesday. Bye, y'all.
Bye.